Hello, this is Mike Johnson from the Ross and Wye Cider and Perry Company, and you are listening to Cider Chat.
Hello and welcome to Cider Chat. My name is Ria Windcaller, and I am the producer and the cider MC of this weekly podcast, where we speak with makers, cider enthusiasts, and folks within the cider trade from around the world. And I'm kind of smiling while I'm talking to you, which happens every week, but this week in particular, it's pretty special for me because I had one of those bucket list experiences of being able to speak with makers who I've really been wanting to touch base with for quite a while, ever since I had their first sip of cider back in 2015. I'll tell you more about that when we go to our main featured chat with both Mike Johnson and his son Albert, who are all about Ross Cider and also helping people discover the wonder of apples. There'll be more on that chat coming straight away, but first, let's have a wee bit of news out and about in Ciderville. It's time to get onto the big bus. Yes, the second annual New England Cider Tour rolling out on October 31st from Greenfield, Massachusetts, is now going to have a much larger bus because the smaller bus has filled up. And we want a little bit more room and spaciousness and fun time for more people to join us. And if you haven't contacted me yet, there is still time now because we have a bigger bus. If you haven't heard about this tour, it's going to New Hampshire and Vermont. We're going to see 6 cideries in one day. Well, I should say 6 makers because we're not going to go to 6 different locations. I mean, come on, that'd be ridiculous. So I've honed this down to really make it easy and accessible and, of course, fun because cider is fun. And meeting some fantastic makers and getting to roll up to New Hampshire, then through Vermont. It's really like quintessential New England. And this all kicks off Franklin County Cider Days, which starts the very next day. And that's 3 more days of cider fun. So if you haven't contacted me yet, please do by sending me an email. You just send it to Ria, that's spelled R-I-A, at ciderchat.com. And you find all the details about this tour at the Totally Cider page at ciderchat.com. And come along with me and ride the cider bus in my spot of Ciderville. And dang, it's going to be so much fun. We got a big bus. Oh, it is a full glass Ciderville. I mean, there is no half empty in our house, is there? Not in our cider house. Because actually this week is a kickoff to Cider Week in the Finger Lakes of New York. It kicks off on September 27th and goes all the way to October 6th. And I will be there next week for the whole week, partaking in many of the events and definitely partaking in the cider and food pairing dinners and exploring the region and reporting back to you. I, of course, am going to have my podcast recorder, so if you want to follow along with me, do it. Follow along on the Cider Chat Facebook page, on Instagram at Cider Chat Ciderville, and on Twitter at Cider Chat. It's really a remarkable area. If you don't know where the Finger Lakes are, consider this. Now, I'm based in Massachusetts, and if I drive west, I'm driving, I come to Albany, which is the capital of New York. For those of you who might think New York City is, well, it's actually Albany, a spectacular city, by the way. And I keep on driving west, and I'm now between Buffalo and Albany. And in that region, south of Lake Ontario, are the Finger Lakes. And they're absolutely spectacular. Just take a look at them on your map. Go ahead, open that up and take a look at the Finger Lakes. It's stunning. And in the area of Cayuga Lake, one of the large lakes, is the city of Ithaca. And that's where Cornell is based at. So we're going to be hooking up with the Cornell folks. And I'm going to just kind of hold back on all of it and just kind of peel it out to you a little bit at a time. But if you are in the cider sphere, you definitely have heard of Cornell University and what they're doing there. And Gregory Peck and what he's doing. It's great. It's great for cider because it's kind of informative in that research piece. And then there's all these cideries. There's like 10 cideries within like 30 miles of each other or from Ithaca. Whew. a lot to be said about that, right? And there will be. So stay tuned for that. And before I go further, you're going to be hearing me say this a lot, but it really means quite a bit to me to thank the sponsors for this here trip to the Finger Lakes, and certainly during the cider week that they are holding. And first off, I want to say a big tip of the glass to Visit Ithaca, which is the tourism board there. I'm really excited to talk to them about how they are helping to promote cider. And then the following cideries. We have South Hill Cider, Black Diamond Cider, Bellwether Hard Cider and Wine Cellars, the Finger Lakes Cider House, a.k.a. Kite and String Cider, and Red Bird Orchard Cider. All these and so many of those other cideries in that region are outstanding. But specifically to these particular cideries, they really are helping Cider Chat get there. So thank you so much. Can't wait to meet up with you and all the cider enthusiasts that are going to be in the region during that time. Follow along. Let's keep the conversation going and keep banging the drums around the world and letting everyone know that cider is going up.
Going up, going up.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Quince. I love hearing Japanese taiko drums. It really does the right effect for banging the drums around the world, don't you think?
Domo arigato. Thank you very much.
Oh, and by the way, if you don't know Mr. Quince, he is one of many talking palms who helps me here in the Cider House as I am producing this here podcast. So always a tip of the glass to Mr. Quince and all the talking palms.
You want to read a letter now, Rhea?
Yes, I do, Mr. Quince, and this is in from Matthew, who is a patron of Cider Chat. He writes, "Howdy, Rhea. Very happy to be a patron. As a current Boston resident, when I'm packed on the tea like a sardine, I know I can always count on Cider Chat to put my nerves at ease. The podcast has been a huge inspiration for me since I very happily stumbled into Ciderville about 2 years ago. I remember sitting at my desk job doing desk job things, and I began daydreaming about everyone who went out there and started breweries from scratch after getting bored with their normal lives. But a brewery didn't feel quite right. It wasn't until later that same week when I was sitting at Far From the Tree in Salem, Massachusetts. That's a cidery in Salem, Massachusetts called Far From the Tree that he's referring to. And he says, it clicked. Here was a drink for me. A true drink of the people. Oh, right on. Apples are always with us in the United States. I grew up near orchards in upstate New York, and come harvest, I loved everything apple-y that came from them as a kid. So why not start thinking about cider as an adult? There was a whole other frontier to my favorite fruit that I never properly considered before. From then on, I've been reading everything I can, talking to everyone I can, and drinking everything I can, safely, of course. Before I found any books, before I even made my first batch, I found Cider Chat. Aw, yeah. I've gained so much from it, even though that goal of a cidery is still very much in the planning phases. I do have a few carboys in the basement happily bubbling away, and you are a big reason why. Cheers to you, Matt. And actually, Matt is going to be on the Cider Tour, the second annual New England Cider Tour, so I get to hang out with you, buddy. We get to raise a whole bunch of glasses. Can't wait to meet you in person, and just going to be tons of fun. Thank you for becoming a patron, and just really thank you for this kind word. Stoked to hear that you're at Far From the Tree, one cidery that I haven't had a chance to speak to. I mean, dang, there's a lot of Massachusetts cideries I feel like I'm neglecting. So it's a good reminder to keep on keeping on. All right, talk to you soon. And when I return, we're going to be heading to our featured chat with Mike and Albert Johnson at Ross on Wye Cider and Perry Company in Ross on Wye in England.
There is a reason why we drink it like this. Yes, there is a reason why we drink it like this. We like cider. We like palms. We like orchards. And having some fun.
For those of you who have been following along with Cider Chat for a while, you know that recently I've just released 2 episodes from my tour to the United Kingdom. And this week's episode is the first one that I'm really sitting down specifically with cider makers and having a longer chat. And it's a real pleasure for me to be able to share with you my conversation with both Mike and Albert Johnson, partly because I found out about them back in 2015 when I was in Amsterdam in the Netherlands during a cider meetup that I had coordinated with a small collection of cider people at that time. Since then, in the past 4 years, cider is really starting to catch on in that Dutch country. But at that time, not so much. And I just so happened to meet Margot, who runs the Het Cider House, and that is based in Utrecht. She's doing a wonderful job bringing in cider, importing it from other locales into her country. Well, that cider bottle was sitting there, kind of like, I didn't really know it. It said Ross Cider on it, and I had a feeling like nobody's taking it. I'm going to grab it. And I did. I checked it. I brought it home, and a few weeks later, I opened it, and I landed at Ross on Wye. It just took me there. So it was such a delight for me to finally have the opportunity to be on that land, on that place, and meet the people behind the cidery. So without further ado, let's go to this chat with Mike Johnson and Albert Johnson of Ross on Wye Cider and Perry Company, based in Ross on Wye in the United Kingdom.
And actually what you say about cider taking you to a place was one of the first things I heard on Cider Chat that got me hooked, was you describing cider from a particular orchard from a particular year as being a time capsule back to that place every time you open the bottle. Mm-hmm. And that just resonated so much with me and with the way we see and make our cider. So that was what got me hooked, and then been listening ever since for the last 2 years. And I kept hoping that one day an email would pop up saying, "Oh, I'm going to be in England," or something like that. And then eventually, thanks to James and Colleen from Duck Chicken, it just happened like that. Yeah. It went from not happening to happening, and now you're here, which is crazy.
So here we are. We're at the Ross Cider Fest 2019. You've been doing this for how many years?
The festival, they tell me this is going to be our 20th anniversary next year. I don't know if that's exactly right.
Well,
I'm not very
no
good
one
at
can remember when it started. So we figured the easiest thing is to just
But
go by
Albert was a
years.
little boy.
Sure.
Yeah.
And was that like a one-day festival the first time? A half day, or, a bunch of friends?
It was a one day, and it was actually held at the local pub.
The Yew Tree.
The Yew Tree Inn, yeah, which at the time was held by somebody else. We've since taken it over, but...
Oh, okay.
But I had this problem that people were buying my cider and taking it off to festivals, and then there was nobody who knew anything about it at the festivals. So I thought I'd like to do a festival myself where people can come and talk to cider makers about the cider they're making, so that they can learn a little bit more about, well, it's craft cider we call it these days, but it was farm cider and real cider. Mm-hmm. And so the landlord said, yes, I've got a marquee, we can put that up and you can have a festival. So we did this for 2 years, and I invited a few of the cider making friends that I had to come and sell their ciders, and people enjoyed it. And it wasn't really that well attended the first 2 years because we couldn't really afford a budget of advertising because it was a free festival. But it grew, and then on the third year the landlord had sold his marquee, and I thought, well, I can't hire one, they're too expensive. I'll bring it to the farm and use the barns, which is what we've done ever since. So, and then on the third year it was so well attended that we had to stop people coming in because the licence was for 500 people, and so ever after that we've ticketed it because we can control the numbers better, and we've actually been able to afford then, because we're selling tickets, to put better music on and just improve the facilities.
You have food here, you have camping in the orchard, which is a really a unique experience for cider enthusiasts who, certainly from the U.S., that wouldn't be allowed. Not if you want to then use the apples. So the fact that you allow camping, you have pets, you have dogs, the sense of enjoyment and not really being uptight. I mean, there's a nice feeling here that's so welcoming. You're doing a banger of a job. It's really great. Yeah.
I know there's a lot of lovely people enjoying themselves last night.
Yeah.
Very relaxed, which it usually is here.
Yeah.
And I think that's also down to using natural drinks without all the chemicals. Then people don't have those extra inputs.
Yeah, no doubt. So you have the cider bar here in the barn, and then you have the upper barn, I'm going to call it. Maybe it's called something else. There's another cider bar there, so there's a spill out area. And today, on Saturday, you have what it's called stalls. So the little stations where people are going to be able to, other makers are bringing in to be selling their product.
Yes.
Yeah. So this is the third year where we've ran our own cider competition at the Yew Tree, and the competition is a bit different because it's peer judged, and instead of charging an entry fee, we ask producers to donate a bit more of their cider than you normally send to a competition. And then we have a bar over that weekend, like a mini festival, where we sell all the cider that's donated, and then all the revenue from that is donated to a local charity in Ross and Wye called Hope Support Services. So the producers who came and supported that event have then been invited to come to have their stall at the cider festival. So we have 10 producers who've contributed to, we raised £1,000 this year at the Yew Tree Trials, plus what we're going to raise this year.
Wow, that's commendable. It really is. It's a fantastic experience, and we could spend this whole conversation just talking about the Ross Cider Fest, but I'd like to talk really more specifically about Ross Cider and what you're doing here. Mike, how long have you been part of Ross Cider? Was it...
Well, in one sense, all my life, but
Right.
I used to be, even as a kid, picking up the apples with my grandmother. But in those days, although we made the odd little bit for us, we sent all the apples to Bulmers, and that continued until about 35 years ago, I think it would have been now, when there was a year when Bulmers didn't want all the non-contract apples, and we had so many apples we had 10 tons of non-contract apples, and Bulmers agreed to take 4 tons, so we turned the other 6 tons into cider, and we've been making it to sell ever since.
We planted the first orchards ordered by Bulmers in '78, and then between then and 2001, we now have 45 acres of bush orchard, which is what 9 acre and everything else that you've seen is.
Right.
Plus then we have an extra 10 acres or so of standard trees of cider apples and peri pears. And up until last year, we were selling about 75 to 80% of our fruit to Bulmers, now owned by Heineken. But because of the state of craft cider, the state of mainstream industrial cider in the UK, there's a huge surplus of cider apples in the UK, and particularly here in Herefordshire. So we negotiated with Heineken, and we're no longer selling them apples. So last year was the first year we didn't do that, and because our orchards are minimal intervention the way we farm, our trees are pretty biennial, and last year was really conveniently an off year, so there was some excess fruit but not a lot. And then this year is the first year where there's going to be a lot of excess fruit. Our plan is to try and double how much we make, to keep the farm sustainable. That's what we're targeting. 100,000 litres, that's what we want to make.
Under
100,000 litres is the target.
100,000. I didn't say, not under 100,000 litres, but 100,000 litres. Okay. So now we're having a classic UK experience with a wee bit of rain coming through.
Rain.
And I've been here the whole time since I arrived, and I haven't had that at all. So it's a little bit of like kind of a baptismal to being out in the countryside.
Well, to be fair, the festival's only ever had a couple of bits of drizzle in its 20 years.
Yeah,
it's usually a pretty good weekend.
I imagine so. No problem. So we'll just see
Unless you're supposed to pass by lunchtime.
Okay, well. Cider people are a pretty hardy crew, but I must admit I was relieved when the light rain ended as soon as I covered up my recording equipment, and in short order carried on with this chat with Mike and Albert Johnson of Ross on Wye Cider and Perry Company in this here episode 194. Obviously, a lot of congeniality around the cider makers here, a lot of, getting together. But, you're in kind of a situation which is so, I can't comprehend it in a way, as a cider drinker and fan, that people are taking down orchards and doing that. So what do you do about that? I mean, what's the voice?
Well, the only orchards that are coming down really are the contract orchards that people have agreed, and to be fair, Heineken have been very fair, haven't they?
Well, they have been. But
so there's no complaints. If you don't want to supply them any longer, they'll pay you to rip up the contract, and they're just oversupplied. But you have to bear in mind these are commercial orchards where they expected a few years ago, when they were put in, say 20 years ago or 10 years ago or whatever, that you'd be making, maybe you'd be getting 20 tonnes an acre, 25 maybe, but some of them now getting 30 to 35 tonnes an acre.
And then on the other side of the scale, in the production side, I went on a tour as a grower of the Bulmers mill, and they are reporting 90 to 95% extraction. All right, so to their standards of what is juice, they're getting an absurd amount out of the tonnage. So that reduces how much tonnage you need.
Right.
Then we have the biggest problem in the UK, which is that the minimum juice content for cider is 35%. And that's not all. What is legally defined as juice is only a specific gravity of 1.045. So, last year was super sunny. Our average SG was probably 1.06 or even a bit higher. So you can water down your full juice to 1.45, right? You can make it consistent, so you have even less juice. So everything is, and then in the UK, the fastest growing category that all the major industrial cider makers put all their money advertising. Well, actually, that's an over-exaggeration, but the fastest growing category is this thing called fruit cider, where actually the flavour of the apple is secondary to whatever concentrated additive you put in it. So then you don't even care if you have Dabinets or Michelin or Ellis Bitter or anything, because all you want is alcohol derived from apple sugar, and then you add something else to it.
Are those higher alcohol by volume, or they're capping it because you're under a certain regulation?
They cap those fruit ciders at 4% generally, because then they pay wine duty. It's made wine duty. It isn't cider duty, which means you don't even have to put apple in if you don't want to. So, in my opinion, they shouldn't be called ciders. But it's very confusing because people think they're drinking ciders and they're not actually, in some cases, drinking anything with apple in.
Right. It's the dominant flavor as a fruit added, as Albert's saying,
so
no doubt.
That's a bit sad for us, but I think the craft cider world is overriding that. People who are really interested can see past all that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really optimistic for where cider, in terms of what we understand as cider, is going in the UK. There's actually more and more producers, and more, and I mean, doing interesting things and doing it with integrity and with intent. And the best thing is that those cider makers are like preserving varieties and doing it in different ways.
Yeah, definitely. What have you seen in your time? I mean, are you in agreement with Albert? And do you two agree a lot on what's going on at Ross Cider? Is it pretty
I
easy?
think, generally speaking, we do agree. I mean, I've always believed in making pure juice ciders and with no chemicals. Okay, we put that very small amount of sulphite in the fresh juice, and that's where it stops. And that's usually broken down by the time we come to sell it.
Why do you put that first amount of sulfite in the juice?
Because it's not worth not putting it in.
That's a good answer.
Well, it is, and because you can get faults, things like mouse. And,
my dad and I are both incredibly susceptible to mouse, and we can detect it very easily. And I think it's a serious problem when you have producers, either knowingly or not, selling cider that's got something like mouse in, or it's oxidized, or it's acetic, or has some kind of Brett infection or whatever. Selling that and not understanding that that's what they're selling. That's really bad, because cider in the UK is often a drink that most people never drink, and many of them overindulged when they were too young, and then they think, oh, cider makes me ill, I don't like it, and then they one day summon the courage to try a cider, and it's got mouse, and that's the end of it. They just go straight back to beer.
Right.
And so you can't sell cider that has a fault, and we don't make enough cider to be able to afford to throw cider away. So it all has to be
but
clean.
people do sell cider that has faults.
They
And I mean, I was in
foul stuff.
a bar, and it was a Perry, but it had gone, quite,
Well, it
acetic,
does happen.
so-
And I was having this discussion the other day, and what is traditional cider? Well, how many hundred years do you go back to call it traditional cider, and what sort of cider would they have made?
Yeah.
But even a couple hundred years ago, or I don't know exactly, but they started realising that when you use these sulphur candles to sterilise your barrels, you've got a better quality cider. And it's been obvious ever since that in homemade wine, people use Camden tablets. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
What I don't agree with is you don't have to use it after you've made the cider. You don't have to use it as a preservative. It's just so unnecessary. If you make good clean cider with alcohol in, it should be enough.
Yeah, we've got alcohol and we've got tannins. So the tannins are a way better preservative than throwing sulfite in.
Right.
So we add sulfite at the beginning. We don't measure pH. We just do it off our understanding of the fruit. So for our bitter sweets, which are high pH, we add a little bit more, up to 100 parts per million.
And you're just kind of, so you are measuring some things here.
No, well, in the beginning, the only thing we measure in the beginning is SG, but we don't temperature control it, so it's not serious
Specific
measurement.
gravity.
Yeah.
Yep.
We just do it as a broad idea to see what the fruit is like generally, and so we can compare year on year, but that's it. But we know, like, if we're bringing in a trailer for the fox whelps, then
with the extra acid, you need less sulfite.
Yeah, and you know your fruits here. You know them.
We know the
them,
fruits,
and that's like invaluable because you have such a long history with that. Getting back to the barrels, at the bar in here you have this, oak barrel. How often are they empty, or is it kind of just you empty them and then you're filling them up again?
They're not normally there, right?
Right,
so
I get that. It's for
the way we use oak barrels in cider making is we ferment in barrel and we take it out, and this is going to sound crazy to all the American listeners, we then mature stuff in plastic so it stays in IBCs or totes, right?
That does sound kind of crazy to me. I'm kind of curious.
Well, from our point of view, the way certainly that we think our cider behaves, the oak barrel is porous, right? So in oak barrel you definitely have micro-oxygenation. So we have this softening of the cider, but it's minimalized because you're also consuming that oxygen during fermentation. And after fermentation you want to reduce oxygen exposure. Now, if we had infinite money, we would probably be using stainless steel, but we're nowhere near that stage. So we use something else. And from our point of view, a tote that's under heavy pressure is less porous than wood.
And are you, walking out to the Perry orchard here, I'm seeing a lot of the IBC tanks. Is that where you're storing them, just outside?
So they have a
they're not sitting there
solution.
for...
We put them out of the way for the festival. So they're just in that orchard temporarily.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Because we need room.
We need all the space we can get.
So where would they be normally then?
Either on the yard or in the building. Yeah.
Okay.
They've all got a small amount of citric acid and metabisulfite in.
Just to hold them square.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It just keeps them clean.
Yeah.
And the thing is that we don't make enough like we're not large scale enough to have loads of empty containers, right? So they get used up throughout the year, and then right now we're about to fill everything again. So they're not empty for that long.
Right.
But with plastic, the one thing is that we try to not hold on to one tote for too many years. And so our oak barrels are only used once as well, because they're even harder to clean. But.
Right, they are. So in some ways, you don't necessarily have a barrel aging, what we'd say a barrel aging program.
We age it, but mostly in plastic, not in...
Mostly in plastic. And you're kicking out like so many different... do you call them styles? Because it's not a style. It's just it's straight up. You're kicking out so many ciders and perries.
A cider or a perry, exactly.
Yeah, it's not a style. It's just what it is. The blend.
In a sense, there's 3 styles.
Okay.
We do bottle conditioned, and that's the one we really enjoy doing. We also do the normal still cider, which is what we're selling out of the barrels there in the festival. And then we do have a small amount of it carbonated and bottled, because that's more of our commercial end, because that's the type of cider people are used to. So we have a concession, otherwise you can't sell enough for people who are used to drinking something that's sweet and fizzy.
A little fizz, we
produce it.
Yeah.
Oh, actually there's 4 now, because now we do kegged as well.
Yeah. Right, but so at our peak this year, the biggest our range was in 2019. At one time we had 87 ciders and perries, right, that you could have chosen to drink.
87 ciders and perries.
Yeah.
I don't know anyone doing what you're doing. I mean, I really don't. In terms of packaging, there's probably people who have done that, but not selling that commercially. And that's a big task to kind of keep that all separate.
Well, the thing is, I think what you have to understand about the life we live is that we're pursuing things that we find interesting and bring us joy, and we're prioritizing that over everything else. We could streamline the whole process and just make
3, whatever,
right? Yeah. And then just do it in a 20,000 litre, but that's not it. We have a farm with 55 acres of apple trees and pear trees, and it's about preserving what we have here,
right?
And we're all like, and John, who's the third person that should get brought into the conversation, who's works with us most of the week and is one of the cider makers, same as us, but he's representing his own cider at the festival. All of us just find it fascinating, and to us it's like, we'd just be so bored if we had to drink the same cider all year. But actually, every time we want to drink cider, we can drink 6 different ones, and they'll be different to the last 6 we tried, and the last 6 we tried, on and on.
That's true. I mean, I hear that a lot, and that's why you're also pretty unique, because you could just try so many. I wonder, though, based on that, somebody like myself coming in, I'd be hard-pressed to be able to try all 80. I'm trying. I'm working it. Believe me, I am working it. But with that said, so for myself, or we'll talk more about somebody passing through, who's like just kind of passing through, are there a couple ciders and perries that you would recommend that would kind of be a
there's
compliment?
always particular favourites at the time, aren't there? And we love, there's 2 or 3 of these new ones that are fantastic, and it's what we would choose to drink if we were given a choice.
Right.
But on the other hand, there's all sorts of other ciders which I love. To be honest, I don't really drink mediums or sweets. It's always going to be a dry cider for me.
Sure.
And I prefer a bittersweet over a sharp. And when somebody new comes in, you have to say to them, well, look, do you like dry, medium or sweet? And then you can give them a taste of something dry, and then you say, well, this is a bittersweet, this is a sharp. What suits you better? And
yeah, I mean, to be honest, I was saying about how it's less important financially, but the great advantage of having 87 ciders is you're pretty sure you're going to be able to find one that someone loves, right?
Well, yeah, you might be doing a lot of pouring in between there. But
but we like giving people that experience. It's part of what we do.
I think we have 18 or so single variety ciders at the moment that are just clean, so it's just bottle conditioned in plastic. They're just presenting the flavour of the apple from that time, and yeah, it's probably objectively true that single variety ciders are less complex and not as good as blended ciders. But what is better than drinking a blended cider is taking someone on a journey and showing them the very extraordinary broad possibilities of what cider apples can do.
Right.
So we love to say to people, they're like, I want to buy 3 bottles. And I'm like, well, you should buy Foxwhelp, Dabinet and Somerset Red Streak. And then you can do everything. You should open them all at once with some friends, taste them individually, and then make your own blend. And understand how cider making works and see it from our eyes.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant. And what people starting out cider making should do too is just take that apple tree that they have and don't mix it, just keep it separate like you're doing to really get to know that. And I think that's a little bit of the missing piece with cider is that folks don't, well, let's say if you're raising cattle, you would, and you were doing it as a beef, situation, you would know the meat from that one cow, and that's how people go for it. But there's so much that's unknown about cider.
Yeah, that's a good analogy, because if you're breeding, you're looking at the conformation of the animal and everything else, and you wouldn't choose that animal to cross with that one because that one's got a fault and so on.
Yeah.
And it's getting to know them, isn't it? It's getting to know and understanding them, seeing them. And
right.
So it depends why you're in cider making. If you just want to make something sweet and fizzy and sell as much as possible, that's a different argument, maybe.
Yeah.
But if you're really interested in the apples, then you have to get to know them. So if you can make some single varieties, you can always blend them later. It's getting to know them is the great thing, and it's fun.
It is fun. It is fun. So that leads me to a question. Why are you into cider making, Mike? Is this something that you just fell in naturally because this is where you are? And
well, this is going back to that earlier story, because Bulmers didn't want the apples all those years ago. We were making it, and then as we were making it, it became more and more interesting, and it just sort of built from there. Prior to that, although my dad and I had made a little bit of Kingston Black cider somewhere, and rolled it round into somebody's stone press and just played about with it, but it wasn't serious, and I was mainly a beer drinker then, so.
Another converted beer drinker.
Yeah, exactly.
I still like beer, but I find I don't drink it very often anymore.
Yeah.
Only when you go out, because you can't usually find a good cider. Not in England.
Right. So if I was going to come into your home and see, what cider you have in Mike's home, what would I typically find sitting in there?
You would typically find a bottle conditioned bittersweet. I love bittersweets with the tannins. Not the acidity. I'm not really into sharp apples and sharp ciders. I appreciate what they give you, but I just prefer drinking bittersweet cider. Maybe a Dabinet or a Major. Ball's bittersweet, lovely.
You could list them all.
You could.
There you go. How about you, Albert? What would we find in your hacienda?
Well, right now my favourite cider is our Pet Nat, so it's bittersweet. It's Dabinet and Harry Master's Jersey, fermented in the oak barrel, and for the first time, because it tastes so great, we bottled it really young. But normally it's we let stuff mature, and again that's our favourite. I think.
So keeved?
No
keeving.
We just don't like sugar.
Yeah.
And keeving, like when it's done well, it's really great, but what I think when we have this fascination with the variety and we know what Dabinet tastes like, when we taste something that's been keeved and the sugar is just there masking the flavour or not letting the flavour develop because it's still too much juice, we don't really like it so much.
A good keef cider, since we've been doing Cider Club, we've had 2 or 3 makers in who have made some fantastic keef ciders, and they were really enjoyable, but we were just having small sips, and that was really interesting.
Yeah, sure.
But to sit down for a whole evening and drink it, it's just not what I would do. Yeah.
Sure. Or, they now have the ice cider.
That's again lovely, but you'd only want a little sip of it.
You only have a little sip, kind of a little palate changer in that way, no doubt. I find it so fascinating that you're able to offer all these different varieties, and so therefore you have all these different trees. You have how many different orchards here, the 9-acre orchard, which is like, it is like going into the land of the gnomes. I've never experienced it. The grass, an orchard always looks different.
Have you been at the far end where the foxhops are? The trees they're like archways.
No, I haven't got there. I'll be going out there
it's
today.
It's like you're in Narnia or something with
yeah.
I don't know why he let them grow like that, because it's really bad.
I had too much work. I didn't really look after them properly.
Is that how they would naturally grow, though?
Well,
that's a foxwell?
Bush orchards aren't really naturally what an apple tree would do. These are more naturally.
You're not pruning these. You're just kind of letting.
Yeah, the standards and our standards. We don't prune a lot. We just every so often have to tidy them up. If you don't look, we've got a fallen down when they're. It's just got too top heavy for its situation.
Yeah. So I see that. Yeah.
Which is rather sad because it's a problem tree. It's like everything.
Yeah, it's a very weak tree.
It's a great apple, but it grows madly in too many branches, and then it's overweight, and it just likes growing, and it's not highly productive sometimes because it likes to grow rather than
produce
fruit.
Too?
Can be.
Yeah.
I think virtually all apples are biennial if you leave them to their own devices.
So with that said, what do you do for your orchard for caring? You do a little bit of pruning.
Well, on the bush orchards, we just look at an orchard and say, are we going to prune this year? It looks like it could do with, and we just say, how many cuts? 4, 3, 5, and then you just can't look back, because when you've got 2,000 trees ahead of you, and only so much time,
because we're pruning by hand, right? So
and we take a branch, and we don't fiddle about with little bits. We take a branch.
We just want to reduce the canopy.
Done. Okay. And do you do any type of nutrient development, for the soil? Is there grazing of animals in the orchard?
Well, that's traditionally, of course, all these, like this is a half standard orchard, and the standard orchards were all grazed. So you've got production from the animals as well as from the trees. And with the introduction of bush orcharding, the animal part was taken out, partly because the trees were too low and they would damage the bark, eat the apples and everything else. As our bush orchards have grown and we've raised the canopy, which is then easier for harvesting because of the machines, we've realised that we can allow sheep back in them as long as you get them off well before harvest time.
I see.
And the only problem with most sheep is that they'll bark the trees, but the Shropshire sheep are sheep that don't bark trees.
I was hearing about those.
Don't know why.
Sheep.
Nobody can actually say why, but they don't bark trees. So my nephew keeps the sheep here now, and he's built up his Shropshire flock. So we're slowly introducing it into some of the orchards. There's not enough sheep to do all the orchards, so he'll go on some orchards one year and other ones the next.
Change it around.
And that's good for the worm control as well.
Yeah, I think so.
So, and also he can use orchards which are biannually, not on one year, and then it doesn't affect our harvest anyway. So I think it's been quite successful, and it saves us input, saves us mowing.
No doubt.
Adds something back to the soil.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you have to do what we'd call in the States pest management for like insects? Are there,
we have
difficulty with that here?
Last year we had a very bad problem with ermine moth, and what they do is when they're in their caterpillar stage, they just climb all over the tree, they eat all the fruit bud, and then they eat all the leaves, and they can totally de-leaf the tree, and then it won't produce nectar either. So we first noticed the problem about 4 or 5 years ago, and because we're not spraying at all, so there's no pesticides. So we put up 100 bird boxes, and it made a difference because there was such an abundance of food, so the birds came right in. And then the next year they'd eaten all the moth, so the birds all left, and then the moth came back. And that's finding some balance. And I think we could put up another, like literally 1,000 bird boxes, because 100 bird boxes is only 2 per acre. It's not very much.
Right.
So we could put up more.
We are going to put more up this year, and because I put them all 5 trees in from the edge of the orchard, every 5th row, and we didn't put any in the middle, and that's where we got the biggest problem
That's
with
where
the
the problem is, because
Interesting.
also
Well,
we have loads of great hedges all over the farm,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That are
Yeah.
totally full of life as well.
I heard the other day someone speaking about caterpillars and blue tits. Apparently, a blue tit to rear a family uses about 14,000 caterpillars.
Wow.
So something like that. Oh, it could be more, but it was a lot.
I would say
So
so.
if we get all those bird boxes used, that's an awful lot of caterpillars that have been taken away.
Wow.
And
Jeez.
this is also a benefit of the sheep, because just having sheep in the orchard crazily improves the biodiversity of the orchard. And then we're going to have more predators coming in that are going to stop the ermine moth damaging the trees.
Yeah. So it seems like there's always something here, right, to work on. And there's always something to learn. Is that
Always. I
that's
think
true?
that will
I mean-
always be true.
Yeah.
But almost that's true in any situation, isn't it? If you don't experiment, open your eyes, try different things.
You would get bored.
You would get
Absolutely.
bored,
Yeah. So is there any ever time off for the cider makers? Do you ever step away? Is it hard to step away from this? Because you are. I mean, you have and before you answer that question, I just want listeners to know, you are multi-tiered in your operation here. You have the cidery, you have the yew tree pub, you have lodging that people could rent. Is there something else I don't know about that I haven't mentioned? Another facet of business?
I don't think so. I mean, we're a farm and we grow apples. We make that apple into cider and we sell that cider, right? And so it makes sense to. We took over the local village pub, as Dad said, 5 years ago, and it was in a slightly poor condition, so we've revived it. Now it's simultaneously a great village pub where people that live in Peterslow, they know what it's about and serve their favourite beer and everything. But it's also becoming a destination for cider drinkers, and especially this year, I'm probably selling more cider than beer, which is unbelievable for a pub in the UK.
Wow.
Forget the fact that we're the guys running it; that's still crazy.
Right.
And so you have that. So it makes sense to then, because we're quite isolated. Like Herefordshire is the most sparsely populated county in England, right? So
No kidding.
There's not many
Who knew?
people here, so
Who knew?
it has to become
More
a
apple
destination.
trees than
And
people,
it also
right?
has the most apple trees of
Yeah.
any county. Which is quite amazing.
Wow, then we're in the zone. That's perfect. That's
Well,
amazing.
I don't know if that's true.
Really?
Apparently, because of all the Bulmer orchards.
Yeah, but you've got all the growing in Kent and everything.
Well, cider
And they're
apples
big.
then.
They're bigger. Cider apples
Well,
for sure. But
Yeah,
anyway.
Yeah.
that's what I've always heard. I've no proof.
And he's sticking to it. I like that image. Why not? It works.
Well, I'd say it's one of the great things about Bulmers. They're responsible
Oh,
for
they are, yeah.
millions of trees. Literally millions over the years.
Yep.
Yeah. You can never.
And in the
kinda
early
put
days,
that
they
down.
did so much research into cider apples and the
Well,
best
you
types.
said earlier one of your favourite varieties, you were listing Ball's Bittersweet,
Yeah.
was made by Edward Balls, I think he was called.
Yeah.
Was a nurseryman for Bulmers in the 1930s. So they brought so many varieties that we grow now. So my dog is called Norman. Although I recently heard a story that suggested this story might not be true, but it's a story that I believe. Fred Bulmer, 1900, they just founded the company and needs to find some really great apple varieties to start getting planted all around Herefordshire. So he goes to Normandy, finds some amazing French varieties like Abondance, brings them back to Herefordshire, starts getting them planted, but they don't use the French names for whatever reason. So, and the French names then got lost. So then in the UK we call them something Norman. So Abondance is White Norman, which we grow on the farm. And we also have Sherrington Norman, Red Norman, Strawberry Norman.
Bulmers Norman.
But yeah, Bulmers Norman is everywhere. Is one of the most important apples in the country because it's a stem builder. So most commercial trees have their rootstock, then Bulmers Norman, then the fruiting variety. So they're really massively influential company.
Yeah. And yet there's, always that kind of feeling of the giant and then trying to catch up to the giant.
Yeah, but
And
I've
that's
had
easy
good
to go
experiences
together.
from Bulmers, and in the early days, if I had a problem cider and I wanted to learn what's wrong, they would test it in their lab for me and let me know. And Westerns have done the same thing. They've been always been helpful to us small makers.
Yeah.
So we don't like to criticise them, and they make high quality commercial ciders. But they're not craft ciders in our sense.
They're not cross ciders. What
They're
do you
not
mean by
no craft. You know,
craft cider?
craft cider.
Sorry. Yes.
We tend to think
Right.
craft cider is something that's
Yeah.
whole juice.
Because I would think they are kind of a cross cider in terms of crossing people over to craft. You know, they get that young drinker.
Yeah.
You know, who wants that really sweet.
Well, but
that palate. But I don't know.
that's true if when they're putting their efforts into like the Magnus effect of about 10 years ago, pouring cider over ice becoming a thing in every
Right.
pub. Like we felt a growth from that, but
Interesting.
that was apple cider, right?
Yeah.
And now the marketing is not on apple cider.
Yeah,
And-
it's different.
It's
now.
on fruit cider.
Yeah.
It's on fruit. Do you think that's the impact of the U.S. to the
Well,
rest
it's mainly the impact of Sweden.
Yeah, it's a
It's
Scandinavian.
Kopparberg and
of... No
Recorderly
kidding.
came over here and they just took the market.
And they just
Crazily,
flooded it with advertisement and
yeah,
made you think you need to drink that.
yeah. And
It's
But-
interesting because in Sweden there's a slight reaction against it, and I've actually been invited to Sweden a few years ago to do a workshop with people who are trying to make craft ciders and real ciders, and there's some lovely people doing it, and they just have the difficulty of the rules about alcohol over there are more difficult for them to sell it without going
Right.
through the government shops.
Yeah.
So it's it would be lovely if they'd relax it enough for people to make craft ciders and sell them from the farms, because it would be a tourist thing for them as well.
Yeah.
So I hope they'll come round to that eventually.
For Herefordshire, this region, tourism, cider tourism, how's that going?
The people who are looking for interesting ciders, they come in and complain that they've been in Herefordshire 3 days and they haven't found a local cider other than Bulmers and Westerns, because that's what
yeah,
most
that's the
pubs
problem.
do.
Pub can
That's the
sell
real
Westerns
problem.
Whoa.
and say this is a local cider.
Wow. I mean, pause on that.
Yeah,
So people are in Herefordshire and they're having difficulty finding cider
in the pubs.
in the pubs.
Real cider, good
Right.
cider in the
Right,
pubs.
right.
I mean, they can find commercial ciders, and they can find fruit ciders.
Well, there's a store right next door to the U Tree here, and I noticed that
Yeah,
they don't have any craft cider that I could see on
No.
their shelf.
No, but to be fair, like
Well, you're right next
Yeah.
door, but
I mean,
however,
we've got
there's
local
another
pubs all around us that don't sell our cider and never
yeah,
have.
Yeah.
And I had a who was that lovely American chap that you met over in America
what?
when you were on your last visit over there? Who'd been to here?
Oh, Wes from Dragon's Head. Wes and Laura.
I think it was Wes. I think we went to the local pub just before the days when we had the U Tree
Okay.
for a meal when he's
Yeah.
here, and he said, "Oh, I'll have some of your cider." And I said, "Well, they don't sell it here." And he said, "I've come right across from America to one of the best cider makers in the world, and the pub doesn't sell your cider."
Yeah. What up with that?
Well,
I mean, no,
I mean,
seriously. I mean, no.
it
What
seriously
up
is
with
a
that?
problem in England that the pubs, a lot of them are obviously tied houses and things like that, but
Right.
they just don't recognise enough that there is another drink, a proper.
Yeah. So here's your son coming into the business full time, cranking up. It must be great to have your kid working for you.
That's
like
fantastic.
That, you know,
Yeah,
it's just
really.
unbelievable.
It's something I never expected.
Really?
He went off to university, doing American studies and politics, and I thought he would be out there in the world doing something in that field.
Mm-hmm.
And then here he is.
And it seems like those parts of your study are really helping you take the reins of the cider industry and what's going on, the politics and all that. And
Yeah, I mean,
you need that.
I did American studies with 1 year in the US, and then I came back and I did a year on the farm and found I wasn't finished, so I did American foreign policy as a master's program, and then finished that and came back.
So have you seen a change for Ross Cider in
definitely.
just that 2 years?
Oh
And
yeah,
wha- and-
it's changing rapidly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and because of all the skills he's got now in the social media area,
Yeah.
we've just become a more well-known place.
Producer.
and
Yeah.
now what's going to happen is the production has to catch up.
Yeah.
Well, to be fair, the sales still have to improve as well.
Well, yeah.
More people
okay.
know about us, but I still need to do better sales. But
Yeah, but that will all come because when something comes in really quick in that way, it's like, whoa, you're doing like a whiplash, saying, what's going on over there? And from my perspective, looking from afar, I've been noticing that too. First, I had this like, little ideal that it was this like, little kind of tiny farm and stuff. And then I come here like, dang, this is a huge operation, and one that I haven't really seen to this capacity, with the 9-acre, with strawberry field, with the Dolly Orchard, right?
Dolly's Meadow,
named after
my dad's old cart horse.
Dolly.
Who died there in the end, and he's buried out there somewhere.
Somewhere.
That was many years ago.
How do you bury a horse? I mean,
you dig a big hole.
I mean, you need a backhoe, right? And that's a big hole.
I think he wouldn't have had a backhoe then.
I was wondering,
This was probably in the 50s.
Hand digging a hole like that. Amazing. Well, you've got a really bright future ahead. I mean, Ross Cider is...
Well, I think there's a bright future all over the world in cider because so many people are interested. Mm-hmm. Have you seen how many... We've got so many great visitors from abroad here at this festival. And they're all cider makers. Yeah. It's really nice, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. It's really amazing, yeah. Well, thank you for doing this, taking the time, of course, with me, being who you are in the world and opening up your home, your farm here. It's really tremendous. I appreciate it. I know a lot of people appreciate it.
Yeah. And it's a pity there isn't more opening up of places because all these people are just thoroughly enjoying being out here in the orchards, aren't they?
Yeah, they sure are. They sure are. I am inspired by the folks at Ross Cider, and I sure hope that you got that hit and that feeling too, because that's really what we need out in Ciderville, don't we? Folks who are passionate, making quality cider, and are full of kindness and good cheer. In fact, on my first night at Broome Farm, it was the Cider Club night, which they have there monthly. It's a meeting of cider makers and the public to come and have a presentation, and each month they have a different presenter. This particular kickoff event to the Ross Cider Fest was a fellow from the Basque region called Hartz Rodriguez, and he is also known as @CidersAle on social media. He was presenting about his apple varieties and different ciders that he had brought from the region. It was absolutely delicious experience. At the end of his talk, up came Albert, and he began pouring Ross ciders. And then he came to one particular cider. It was their 2017 vintage called Raison d'être. And what that means is reason for being. Let me read a little bit of what it says on the back here. It is a quintessential expression of our cider making, returning for a second vintage. Our philosophy in a single cider: clean, ripe, bittersweet apples, wild fermented in an oak cask. It's just kind of that classic style, but oh so unique. And everyone loved it. It was just being grabbed at every chance possible during the festival while I was there. Unbeknownst to me, Albert started speaking about my work and presented me the first bottle from this particular vintage. There's a little spot on the bottle in the, looking at the label in the right-hand corner where it says bottle number, and they wrote Rhea. I was truly speechless, which is unusual for me. I think I even swelled up a little bit, started crying, and got a little red face and had to sit down because it was just so unexpected. I could blame it on jet lag, but it just was really unexpected and so kind, so kind. So I want all you guys out there and gals in Ciderville who I met at the Ross Cider Fest to know that I'm holding this close to my chest right now, and I will open it. I'm not sure when. I have a birthday coming up in like a couple weeks here. 10/10 is my birthday, so maybe I'll do it then. I don't know, but I'm going to hold on to it, and even once this bottle's empty, I'll hold on to it even further. Thank you very much. Thank you for helping to keep cider going up, being part of the campaign for Cider Chat, and just being the people who you are. This is episode 194, and we are 6 episodes away now from the 200th episode of A Cider Chat, which is brought to you weekly through the fine support of patrons via the Cider Chat Patreon page. Become a patron today and help keep cider going up. My name is Rhea Windcaller, and I look forward to seeing you in Ciderville.
We like cider. We like palms. We love orchards and heaven. There is a reason why we do it like this. Yes, there is. There is a reason why we do it like this. Oh, yes, there is. There is a reason why we drink it like this. Yes, there is a reason why we do it like this. We like walking through the orchards, dancing in the street, smelling all the blossoms, kicking up our feet. We like cider. We like palms. We like orchards. Having some fun. There is a reason why we do it like this. Oh yes, there is. There's a reason why we do it like this. Oh yes, there is. There is a reason why we drink it like this. Yes, there is. There is a reason. We like walking down the orchards, dancing in the street, smelling all the blossoms, kicking up our feet. Oh yeah. We like cider. Oh yes, we do. We like palms. Oh yes, we do. We love orchards, having some fun. There is a reason why we do it like this. There is a reason.